Right now, as you're watching this video, 10 American states are experiencing something unprecedented. Not a natural disaster, not a war, but something far more insidious. A slow, systematic collapse that's happening right under our noses. Illinois has lost over 800,000 residents in just one decade. West Virginia's population has dropped by nearly 4% in the last 3 years alone. California, the Golden State, saw 700,000 people leave between 2020 and 2022. These aren't just statistics. These are your neighbors, your family members, maybe even you. And the question you need to ask yourself is, could my state be next? Stay with me for the next few minutes because what I'm about to reveal might completely change how you view your future in America. Today, we're exposing something the mainstream media isn't talking about, the hidden collapse of American states. We're not talking about doomsday scenarios or conspiracy theories. We're talking about hard data, real trends, and the 10 states that are showing every warning sign of systemic failure. And here's what makes this terrifying. The collapse isn't sudden, it's gradual. Like a frog in boiling water, residents don't realize what's happening until it's too late. But first, we need to understand what state collapse actually means in modern America. When we talk about state collapse, we're not talking about governments shutting down or states seceding from the Union. We're talking about something more subtle but equally devastating. Louisiana, the Bayou State, rich in culture, history, and natural resources. But economically, it's drowning. Louisiana lost over 25,000 residents between 2020 and 2023. That might not sound like much, but for a state of just 4.5 million people, that's significant. The poverty rate? 19.6%, second highest in the nation. Nearly 1 in 5 Louisianans lives below the poverty line. Infrastructure grade? D+. Their roads are crumbling, coastal erosion is accelerating, and hurricane damage from past decades still hasn't been fully repaired. But here's the real kicker. Louisiana ranks 49th out of 50 states in fiscal health, according to the Mercatus Center. The state's revenue system is outdated, overly dependent on oil and gas prices, and completely unprepared for economic volatility. Young people are leaving in droves. Louisiana State University graduates are fleeing to Texas, Florida, and Georgia, where opportunities actually exist. If you live in Louisiana, you've probably felt this. The opportunities aren't there like they used to be. The infrastructure keeps getting worse. The taxes keep going up, but services keep getting cut. That's the definition of collapse in slow motion. Mississippi. I'm just going to lay out the facts, and you tell me if this sounds like a thriving state. Median household income, $49,000, dead last in the nation. Poverty rate, 19.4%, also dead last. Life expectancy, 71.9 years, the lowest in America, and comparable to some developing nations. Education attainment, only 23% of adults have a bachelor's degree or higher. Mississippi has been stuck in this position for decades, but here's what's new, they're now experiencing negative population growth. Between 2020 and 2023, Mississippi lost over 13,000 residents. The state's GDP growth has been anemic, consistently underperforming the national average. Major industries? Limited. Tech sector? Basically non-existent. Here's the brutal truth. Mississippi shows us what happens when a state falls behind and can never catch up. The gap between Mississippi and prosperous states isn't closing, it's widening every single year. And when young people grow up, get educated, and immediately leave for better opportunities elsewhere, that's the brain drain that ensures the cycle continues. West Virginia is the poster child for economic transition failure. This state's story is about what happens when your entire economy is built on one industry and that industry dies. Coal made West Virginia rich for over a century, but coal is dying, and West Virginia never adapted. The statistics are devastating. Population decline, 3.6% since 2020. That's over 60,000 people from a state that only had 1.8 million to begin with. West Virginia is the only state in America that has fewer people today than it did in 1950. Think about that. 75 years of continuous decline. Drug overdose rate, 52 deaths per 100,000 people, the highest in the nation, more than double the national average. Youth unemployment and underemployment, through the roof. There's literally nothing for young people to do there except leave. Drive through West Virginia today and you'll see abandoned coal towns, shuttered businesses, decaying infrastructure. The state government has tried to diversify, attempting to attract tech companies, outdoor tourism, remote workers. But here's the problem. When your population is aging, your workforce is shrinking, and your tax base is evaporating, how do you fund the infrastructure and services needed to attract new residents? It's a catch-22 that West Virginia cannot solve. Now, this one might surprise you. Connecticut, the wealthy New England state? Yes, absolutely. Connecticut is proof that even rich states can collapse, and sometimes their collapse is faster because they have further to fall. Connecticut lost over 30,000 residents between 2020 and 2023. They're experiencing their first sustained population decline in state history. But here's what makes Connecticut's situation unique. They're losing their wealthy residents, the hedge fund managers, the executives, the high-income earners who paid the bulk of state taxes. They're fleeing to Florida, Texas, and the other no-income tax states. The state's fiscal situation is a disaster. Over $120 billion in unfunded liabilities, one of the worst credit ratings in the nation, debt per capita over $22,000 for every single resident, including children. Connecticut raised taxes on the wealthy to try to close budget gaps, so more wealthy people left. So they raised taxes again, more people left. See the pattern? The state is caught in a death spiral. Their tax base is shrinking while their obligations, pensions, infrastructure, services, keep growing. Major corporations like General Electric, gone, moved headquarters to Boston, then Texas. Aetna merged and moved operations. The list goes on, and on, and on. When wealthy people and major corporations flee, that's not just about money. It's about the state losing its ability to fund the quality of life that once made it attractive. New Mexico has some of the most beautiful landscapes in America, but beauty doesn't pay the bills. New Mexico ranks near the bottom in almost every quality of life metric. Education, 49th in the nation for K-12 education quality. Crime, second highest violent crime rate in America, 780 violent crimes per 100,000 residents. Poverty, 18.2% poverty rate, fourth highest nationally. The state's economy is overly dependent on federal government spending. Military bases, national laboratories, federal lands. When federal budgets tighten, New Mexico feels it immediately. Population growth has stagnated. Between 2020 and 2023, they've barely added 10,000 people, and most of that is births, not people moving in. The brain drain is severe. University of New Mexico graduates leave the state at alarming rates. Why? Because job opportunities simply don't exist at the level they do in neighboring Colorado, Texas, or Arizona. New Mexico's median household income is just $52,000, 45th in the nation. When you combine low income, high crime, poor education, and limited opportunities, you create an environment where anyone who can leave does leave. Okay, we're halfway through the list, and I want to know, is your state on this list, or are you surprised by any of the states we've covered so far? Drop a comment right now with your state and whether you think it's at risk. Michigan, the Great Lakes state, the automotive capital of America, or at least it used to be. Detroit's bankruptcy in 2013 was the warning shot, and while Detroit has seen some revitalization, the rest of Michigan tells a darker story. Population loss. Michigan lost 40,000 residents between 2020 and 2023. They've lost population for 2 decades. But here's what you need to understand. Michigan's economy is still dangerously dependent on the auto industry, and the auto industry is in crisis. The transition to electric vehicles is eliminating jobs faster than new ones are being created. Ford, GM, Stellantis, they're all cutting workforce, moving production overseas, or automating. The UAW strikes of 2023 exposed just how fragile the relationship between workers and manufacturers has become. Infrastructure: Michigan has the worst roads in America. Not an opinion, fact. 42% of Michigan roads are in poor condition. Your car feels it every time you drive. Cities like Flint still haven't fully recovered from the water crisis. That happened in 2014, over a decade ago. The brain drain is accelerating. Michigan State and University of Michigan graduates are leaving for Chicago, Austin, Seattle, anywhere but Michigan. The state is trying to diversify into tech, but they're competing with states that offer better weather, lower taxes, and more established tech ecosystems. It's an uphill battle they're losing. Alaska is America's last frontier, but it might also be America's first abandoned state. Now I know what you're thinking. Alaska pays residents to live there. They get oil dividend checks. True, but those checks aren't enough to overcome the massive structural problems. Cost of living, 30% higher than the national average. Everything has to be shipped in or flown in. Population loss. Alaska lost over 17,000 residents between 2016 and 2023. That's nearly 3% of their total population. Economic dependence. 90% of state revenue comes from oil. When oil prices drop, the entire state budget collapses. And here's the crisis. Oil production on Alaska's North Slope has been declining for decades. Prudhoe Bay is running dry. New exploration is constantly blocked by environmental regulations. So what happens when the oil runs out? Alaska has no backup plan, no diversified economy, no major industries outside of oil, fishing, and tourism. Young people are fleeing. The military presence is the only thing keeping some communities alive. Alaska also has the highest cost of living, extremely limited healthcare access, and brutal isolation. Internet infrastructure, barely functional outside of Anchorage. Alaska proves that natural resource wealth isn't enough. Without economic diversification and infrastructure investment, even the richest states can collapse. Before you rage comment, hear me out. I'm not talking about New York City. I'm talking about New York State. And yes, New York State is collapsing. New York lost 600,000 residents between 2020 and 2023. That's more than any state except California. They lost an entire congressional seat due to population decline. But here's the real story. New York is bifurcating. New York City remains economically vibrant, for now. But upstate New York, it's dying. Buffalo, Rochester, Syracuse, all shrinking. Manufacturing jobs gone, young people leaving, Rust Belt decay everywhere you look. Tax burden. New York has the highest tax burden in America. Combined state and local taxes consume 15.9% of income compared to 9.9% nationally. The result? A mass exodus of wealthy residents and businesses to Florida, Texas, and the Carolinas. Carl Icahn moved to Florida, saved millions. Paul Tudor Jones, Florida. Billionaires and businesses are leaving en masse, taking their tax revenue with them. New York's response? Raise taxes on those who remain. Classic death spiral. Infrastructure is crumbling. The subway system is falling apart. Bridges are in disrepair. The state has over $440 billion in debt and unfunded liabilities. Here's the terrifying part. New York's pension crisis is worse than Illinois' when adjusted for population. But nobody's talking about it because New York City's economy masks the rot underneath. When, not if, New York City's financial sector takes its next major hit, the entire state's fiscal house of cards could collapse. The Golden State, the fifth largest economy in the world if it were its own country. How could California be number 2 on this list?
because California has been experiencing the fastest collapse of any American state relative to its former prosperity. Population loss. For the first time in 150 years, California experienced negative population growth. They lost 700,000 people between 2020 and 2022 alone. 750,000 people left the state of California in 2 years. But it's who is leaving that matters, not retirees. They were already leaving. It's middle-class families, it's businesses, it's the economic engine that made California great. Tesla moved to Texas, Oracle, Texas, Hewlett-Packard Enterprise, Texas, CBRE, Texas, Charles Schwab, Texas. The list goes on and on and on. Cost of living. The median home price in California is $830,000. That's nearly double the national average. In San Francisco, try $1.5 million. Homelessness crisis. California has 28% of America's homeless population, despite being only 12% of the total population. Rolling blackouts, water shortages, wildfire seasons that last year-round, insurance companies fleeing the state because they can't manage risk. Tax burden. California has the highest income tax in America, 13.3% at the top rate, plus sales tax, plus property tax, plus gas tax, the highest in the nation. And what do residents get for all those taxes? Deteriorating services, terrible traffic, failing schools in many districts, and a quality of life that's declining year over year. California shows us that even the mighty can fall. Wealth and past success don't protect you from systemic policy failures. Illinois, number 1 on our list. And if you live there, you already know why. Illinois has lost population for 9 consecutive years. Over 800,000 people have left since 2013. They've lost 2 congressional seats. But the population loss is just the symptom. The disease is fiscal insolvency. Illinois has $533 billion in debt and unfunded liabilities. Their pension systems are only 43% funded, meaning they have less than half the money they need to pay promised benefits. Debt per capita, over $41,000 for every single resident, including children. Property taxes, second highest in the nation and rising every year. In some Chicago suburbs, property taxes can exceed $20,000 annually. Credit rating. Illinois has the worst credit rating of any U.S. state. They're one step above junk status. That means every dollar they borrow costs more, digging the hole deeper. Corruption. Illinois has had 6 governors in the last 50 years. 4 of them went to prison. The political machine is broken beyond repair. Crime in Chicago is driving middle-class flight. Businesses are leaving, the tax base is eroding, and the state governance response? Raise taxes, borrow more money, kick the can down the road. Here's the reality. Illinois is mathematically insolvent. The pension obligations cannot be paid without either massive federal bailouts or a default that would devastate public employees. Every year they don't address it, the problem gets exponentially worse. Illinois isn't collapsing slowly anymore. The collapse is accelerating. So there you have it. 10 states showing systemic signs of collapse. 10 states where residents are voting with their feet and leaving. Louisiana, Mississippi, West Virginia, Connecticut, New Mexico, Michigan, Alaska, New York, California, and Illinois. If you live in one of these states, this isn't about panic. It's about awareness and preparation. Understand the trends, plan accordingly, advocate for change. And if you don't live in one of these states, don't get comfortable. State collapse isn't inevitable, but it's also not impossible. Drop a comment. Which state surprised you most? Where do you live, and do you agree with this assessment? Hit that subscribe button for more real talk about issues that actually matter to your life. And share this video with someone who needs to see it, because whether we like it or not, these trends are shaping the future of America. I'll see you in the next one.